My name is Marcus Rivera, and as I stood in my modest one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, adjusting the tie I'd bought on sale 3 months ago, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever escape my younger brother's shadow. The wedding invitation lay on my kitchen counter, elegant cream cardstock with gold embossing that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Tyler Rivera and Helena Whitmore, request your presence, it read, and beneath that, in smaller text that felt like an afterthought, Marcus Rivera, best man. I picked up my phone and scrolled through Tyler's latest Instagram post, a photo of him and Helena at some charity gala, both of them gleaming with the kind of confidence that comes from never doubting your place in the world. The caption read, "Ready to marry my queen tomorrow. Life is good when you work hard and dream big." The comments were flooded with congratulations from his corporate law colleagues, each one more effusive than the last. 28 years old, and Tyler had everything I'd been told mattered. A corner office at Morrison & Associates, a penthouse apartment in Scottsdale, and now a fiancé whose family owned half of Phoenix's real estate. Meanwhile, I lived in a neighborhood where the air conditioning worked sporadically, and my car made concerning noises every time I started it. But as I glanced at the stack of case files on my desk, files representing people who had nowhere else to turn, I reminded myself why I'd chosen this path. The Rodriguez family, whose teenage son I'd kept out of adult prison. Mrs. Chen, whose disability benefits I'd fought to restore. David Martinez, whose case had consumed 3 years of my life, and whose freedom meant more to me than any corporate bonus ever could. My phone buzzed. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my shoulders relax for the first time all morning. "Hey," her voice was warm through the speaker. "Ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be. Just trying to mentally prepare for another day of being Tyler's less successful older brother." "Marcus," Sophia's tone grew serious. "You know that's not who you are, right? What you did with the Martinez case will never matter to my family." I interrupted, though her words touched something deep in my chest. To them, success is measured in billable hours and luxury cars. Well, some of us know better. Some of us see what you really accomplish. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Same dark hair as Tyler, same brown eyes, same stubborn Rivera jawline. But where Tyler radiated charisma and easy confidence, I saw someone who'd learned early to make himself small, to not take up too much space in a room already dominated by his brother's presence. I remembered being 12 years old, watching Tyler, only 8 at the time, charm our extended family at Christmas dinner with stories about his little league team. I'd spent weeks building a model airplane, carefully painting every detail, hoping to impress our grandfather. But when I finally showed it to him, he barely glanced up from Tyler's animated retelling of a game-winning hit. "That's nice, mijo," Grandpa had said absently, his attention entirely focused on Tyler. "Your brother's got quite the arm, doesn't he?" I nodded and slipped away to my room, where I'd carefully placed the airplane on my shelf and never mentioned it again. Now, 30 years old, and still feeling like that overlooked 12-year-old, I gathered my keys and headed for the door. The country club where Tyler was getting married was in Paradise Valley, a world away from my corner of Phoenix, where people measured success not in dollars, but in lives changed, families reunited, and justice served. As I drove toward what I knew would be another day of being invisible in my own family, I had no idea that everything was about to change. The Paradise Valley Country Club rose before me like a monument to wealth, its Spanish colonial architecture gleaming white against the Arizona sky. Valets in crisp uniforms directed a parade of luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, and Teslas, while I pulled up in my 12-year-old Honda Civic, its engine making that familiar rattling sound that I'd been meaning to get fixed for months. Walking through the marble-floored lobby, I felt the familiar weight of not belonging. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows on walls lined with oil paintings of distinguished men in golf attire, and everywhere I looked, I saw the easy confidence of people who'd never questioned their place in the world. "Marcus." My mother's voice cut through the elegant murmur of conversation. Carmen Rivera approached, resplendent in a navy dress that I suspected cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, and her smile was the kind reserved for special occasions. "Mijo, you look handsome. But where's your boutonniere? Tyler specifically requested white roses for the wedding party."
Before I could answer, she was already adjusting my tie with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 30 years managing details. "Your brother is so excited. He's been talking all morning about his speech for tonight. He's written something very special about family and success." I nodded, swallowing the familiar tightness in my throat. In the distance, I could see Tyler holding court near the bar, his arms animated as he told some story to a circle of admirers. Even from across the room, his charisma was palpable, the way people leaned in when he spoke, the spontaneous laughter that erupted at his jokes. "Mr. Rivera?" A woman's voice interrupted my observation. I turned to see Helena's father, James Whitmore, approaching with his wife, Eleanor. James was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of firm handshake that suggested he'd spent decades closing deals and commanding boardrooms. "Pleasure to meet you," he said, his eyes already scanning me with the efficiency of someone accustomed to quick assessments. "Helena's told us so much about Tyler's family. You're the other lawyer, correct?" "Public defender," I clarified, extending my hand. "Ah." The single syllable carried volumes. Mrs. Whitmore's smile became slightly more strained, the kind of polite expression reserved for disappointing news. "That must be fulfilling, helping those less fortunate." "It is," I replied simply, noting how quickly they'd categorized me. In their world, there were lawyers who made money and lawyers who made excuses for not making money. "James was just telling me about the new development project," my father Roberto chimed in, with a glass of scotch and his best networking smile. "60 million in commercial real estate. Tyler's firm is handling all the legal work." I watched my father's face light up as he discussed Tyler's involvement in the project, the same expression he'd worn when Tyler made varsity basketball in high school, or when he'd graduated summa cum laude from law school. Pride, pure and uncomplicated, radiating from every word. "And what about you, Marcus?" Mrs. Whitmore asked with the forced politeness of someone making conversation. "Any exciting cases lately?" I thought about David Martinez, about the 3 years I'd spent fighting to overturn his wrongful conviction, about the small nights reviewing evidence and the small victories that had led to his eventual freedom. I recently wrapped up a case involving criminal justice reform. It's been meaningful work. "Reform," James repeated as if tasting something unpleasant. "Well, I suppose someone has to handle those cases." The conversation moved on, flowing around me like water around a stone. They discussed vacation homes and investment portfolios, charity galas, and exclusive golf tournaments. I stood there, smiling and nodding at appropriate intervals, feeling increasingly like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. "Marcus!" My father Roberto chimed in with a glass of scotch and his best networking smile. 60 million in commercial real estate. Tyler's firm is handling all the legal work." I watched my father's face light up as he discussed Tyler's involvement in the project, the same expression he'd worn when Tyler made varsity basketball in high school, or when he'd graduated summa cum laude from law school. Pride, pure and uncomplicated, radiating from every word. "And what about you, Marcus?" Mrs. Whitmore asked with the forced politeness of someone making conversation. "Any exciting cases lately?" I thought about David Martinez, about the 3 years I'd spent fighting to overturn his wrongful conviction, about the small nights reviewing evidence and the small victories that had led to his eventual freedom. I recently wrapped up a case involving criminal justice reform. It's been meaningful work. "Reform," James repeated as if tasting something unpleasant. "Well, I suppose someone has to handle those cases." "Marcus." Tyler's voice boomed across the space as he approached, arms spread wide for an embrace. He looked every inch the successful groom. Designer tuxedo, perfect hair, and that megawatt smile that had been charming people since childhood. "There's my big brother. Everyone, this is Marcus, my best man and the family conscience." The gathered guests chuckled at his characterization, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Tyler clapped me on the shoulder with enough force to make me step forward slightly. Marcus keeps us all honest. While I'm out there making deals and building wealth, Marcus is fighting the good fight for society's underdogs. Different paths, right, bro? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Around us, the conversation resumed, but I caught the subtle exchanges of glances, the unspoken judgments. Here, in this world of crystal and marble, my work seemed quaint at best, naive at worst. As Tyler was pulled away by another group of well-wishers, I found myself standing alone near a window overlooking the meticulously manicured golf course. In the distance, the mountain stood silent and eternal, unchanged by the human dramas playing out in their shadow. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Remember who you are and what you've accomplished. I'll be there soon to remind you." I smiled for the first time since arriving, tucking the phone back into my jacket as I prepared to take my position for the ceremony that would officially crown Tyler as the family's greatest success story. The ceremony was set to begin in the club's rose garden, where white chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an archway draped with cascading flowers. I took my position at the altar as watched guests filled in with the measured pace of people accustomed to formal occasions. The Arizona sun filtered through the palm fronds overhead, casting dancing shadows across the assembled crowd.
But something unexpected had happened. Reverend Torres, the family friend who was supposed to officiate, stood to the side, looking slightly bewildered. In his place stood a woman I didn't recognize, distinguished with silver-streaked hair and the kind of bearing that commanded immediate respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying easily across the garden, "I am Judge Patricia Hernandez of the United States District Court for the District of Arizona. Reverend Torres has graciously allowed me to officiate today's ceremony." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught my parents exchanging confused glances, and even James Whitmore looked surprised. Tyler, standing beside me, whispered, "Did you know about this?" I shook my head, studying the judge's face. There was something purposeful in her expression, as if this wasn't simply a last-minute substitution, but something more deliberate. The processional began with Helena's bridesmaids, each one a vision in dusty rose silk, but my attention kept drifting to Judge Hernandez, who watched the proceedings with an intensity that seemed out of place for a simple wedding ceremony. When Helena appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace gown, the judge's expression softened into something approaching warmth. "Dearly beloved," Judge Hernandez began, once Helena reached the altar, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Tyler and Helena. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that marriage is not just about two individuals. It's about the families and communities that shape us, support us, and sometimes challenge us to become better than we thought possible." Her eyes swept across the assembled guests, lingering for a moment on my parents before settling briefly on me. Something in her gaze made my pulse quicken, though I couldn't understand why. Tyler's vows were everything I'd expected: polished, confident, delivered with the easy charm that had always defined him. "Helena," he said, taking her hands, "I've made you want to be the man worthy of your love. Together, we're going to build an empire, a legacy that our children will be proud of. I promise to give you the life you deserve, filled with success, adventure, and everything money can buy." The crowd murmured appreciatively. I watched my mother dab at her eyes with a tissue while my father beamed with unmistakable pride. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Helena's vows were more surprising. She spoke of wanting authenticity, of hoping their marriage would be built on substance rather than appearances. "Tyler," she said, her voice wavering slightly, "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who value what you have over who you are. With you, I want to discover what really matters.
I promise to love the man you are, not just the success you've achieved." I found myself studying her face as she spoke, noting the way her eyes seemed to search Tyler's, as if looking for something deeper than the confident facade he presented to the world. "The rings," Judge Hernandez announced, and I fumbled for the platinum band in my jacket pocket. As I handed it to Tyler, the judge caught my eye again, and this time I was certain there was recognition in her gaze. "Tyler," the judge continued, "do you take Helena to be your wife, to honor and cherish her through success and setbacks, in times of prosperity and challenge?" "I do," Tyler replied, sliding the ring onto Helena's finger with practiced smoothness. "Helena, do you take Tyler to be your husband, promising to support his dreams while remaining true to your own values and convictions?" "I do," Helena whispered, though something in her voice suggested uncertainty. As Judge Hernandez pronounced them husband and wife, I felt an odd mixture of emotions. Joy for my brother, despite everything. Sadness for the distance that seemed to grow wider between us with each passing year. And something else, a nagging sense that this ceremony was about more than just Tyler and Helena's union. The kiss was theatrical, drawing cheers and applause from the crowd. Tyler spun Helena around, his face radiating triumph, while she laughed with what seemed genuine happiness. For a moment, watching them, I could almost forget the years of comparisons and dismissals. As the recessional began and the wedding party filed out, Judge Hernandez fell into step beside me. "Marcus Rivera," she said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear over the string quartet. "I'm sorry," I replied, confused. "Have we met before?" She smiled, an expression that held secrets. "Not exactly, but your work has come to my attention recently. Your dedication to justice is notable."
Before I could ask what she meant, we'd reached the end of the aisle, and the crowd was already dispersing toward the reception. Sophia appeared at my side, having arrived just in time for the ceremony, her presence immediately calming my nerves. "How was it?" she asked, squeezing my arm. "Strange," I admitted, watching Judge Hernandez disappear into the crowd. "I think something's happening here that I don't understand." Sophia followed my gaze. "What do you mean?" "The judge," I said slowly. "She knows something about me, about my work." As we walked toward the cocktail reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that this day was about to become something entirely different from what any of us had expected. The judge's words echoed in my mind. "Your dedication to justice is notable." What could a federal judge possibly know about my work that my own family didn't? The reception area was already filling with guests, champagne glasses glinting in the late afternoon sun. Tyler and Helena moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and posing for endless photographs. But somewhere in the background, Judge Hernandez watched it all with the same purposeful intensity I'd noticed during the ceremony. Whatever was coming, I sensed it would change everything. The cocktail reception buzzed with the kind of conversation that only happened when successful people gathered to celebrate their own success. I nursed a glass of champagne that probably cost more than my weekly coffee budget, watching Tyler work the crowd like a seasoned politician. Every handshake seemed calculated, every laugh precisely timed. "So, Marcus," James Whitmore appeared beside me, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for polite interrogation. "Helena mentioned you're in criminal defense. Must be, challenging work." Around us, a small circle had formed, other wedding guests drawn by the prospect of hearing about the Rivera family's less impressive son. I recognized a few faces from Tyler's social media posts, partners from his firm, clients with expensive watches, Helena's sorority sisters with their perfect smiles. "It is," I replied, simply, taking a small sip of champagne. "I imagine the pay is quite different from corporate law, but I suppose it's rewarding in other ways." Tyler materialized as if summoned by the scent of an awkward conversation. "My brother's the family idealist," he said, throwing an arm around my shoulders with enough force to make me step sideways. While I'm building wealth and securing our family's future, Marcus is out there tilting at windmills. The group chuckled politely. I felt my face flush, the familiar heat of childhood embarrassment creeping up my neck. "Don't sell yourself short, Marcus," one of Tyler's colleagues said with the kind of condescending encouragement typically reserved for children. "Public service has its place. Someone has to help the less fortunate." "Exactly," Tyler agreed, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "Reminds us where we came from. Right, big brother?" I managed a nod, not trusting my voice. Around the circle, I caught the subtle exchanges of glances, the unspoken communication of people who'd quickly categorized me as the family disappointment. "Marcus," Sophia's voice cut through the tension like a lifeline. She appeared in a simple black dress that somehow made her more radiant than all the designer gowns around us. "Youth Center?" Mrs. Whitmore inquired with polite interest. "I'm a social worker. Marcus and I met through our work with at-risk kids. He's helped several of my clients navigate the juvenile justice system." The conversation shifted uncomfortably. In this world of profit margins and quarterly reports, mention of juvenile offenders felt like bringing up an unpleasant medical condition. "Well," James Whitmore cleared his throat, "that's certainly necessary work." Tyler's laugh was just a little too loud. "See? I told you my brother attracts the do-gooders. Birds of a feather, right?" Before I could respond, a server appeared with a small bell announcing that dinner was served. As the crowd began moving toward the reception hall, I caught sight of Judge Hernandez near the bar, watching our interaction with that same purposeful intensity I'd noticed during the ceremony. "You okay?" Sophia whispered as we walked. "Just the usual," I murmured. But something in the judge's expression made me wonder if tonight might be different after all.
The reception hall glittered under crystal chandeliers as guests settled at tables draped in ivory silk. I sat at the head table, watching Tyler rise for what I knew would be his moment of triumph. He looked every inch the successful groom, confident, radiant, completely in his element. "Family and friends," Tyler began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Today isn't just about Helena and me, it's about the journey that brought us here, the choices that define us." The crowd settled into attentive silence. I forced a smile, knowing what was coming. "Growing up, my brother Marcus and I took very different paths," Tyler continued, his tone warm but pointed. "I chose ambition, success, building something meaningful. Marcus chose a different route." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. I felt Sophia's hand find mine under the table. "While I was climbing the corporate ladder securing our family's financial future, my big brother was defending criminals and chasing lost causes," Tyler said, his smile never wavering. "Don't get me wrong, someone has to do it, right? Someone has to represent the people who can't afford real lawyers." The laughter grew louder. I saw my parents sitting rigidly, Mom's uncomfortable smile frozen in place, Dad nodding along as if Tyler's words made perfect sense. "Marcus was always the dreamer in the family," Tyler pressed on, his voice dripping with false affection. "Fighting for the underdog, tilting at windmills, never quite understanding that good intentions don't pay the bills. He's like our family conscience, always there to remind us where we came from, even if he never figured out where he was going." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Heat flooded my face as hundreds of eyes turned toward me, some pitying, others dismissive. Helena looked deeply uncomfortable, her jaw tight as she stared at her new husband. "So here's to Marcus," Tyler raised his glass, "the brother who taught me that someone has to be the cautionary tale. Thanks for showing me what not to do with my life, big brother." The toast echoed around the room. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Years of accumulated hurt crystallized into this single, humiliating moment. As the applause died down and Tyler prepared to continue his speech, a clear voice cut through the silence. "Excuse me." Judge Hernandez stood, her presence immediately commanding the room's attention. Tyler froze mid-gesture, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips, confusion replacing his confident smile. "I apologize for interrupting," Judge Hernandez said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "But I feel compelled to address what I've just witnessed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I watched my parents exchange bewildered glances, while Helena's father leaned forward, clearly trying to understand why a federal judge was intervening in a wedding speech. For those who don't know me, I am Judge Patricia Hernandez of the United States District Court for the District of Arizona. I specifically requested to officiate this ceremony today, not because of any connection to the bride or groom, but because of someone else in this room. My heart began to race. Something in her tone, in the way her eyes briefly met mine, sent electricity through my veins. "Tyler," she said, turning to address my brother directly, "your speech was illuminating. It revealed quite a bit about how you perceive success and family loyalty, but it also revealed a profound ignorance about your own brother's achievements." Tyler's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The confident performer who had commanded the room moments earlier now looked like a deer caught in the headlights. "You see," Judge Hernandez continued, her voice growing stronger, "I've had the privilege of observing Marcus Rivera's work for the past several months. His dedication, his brilliance, his unwavering commitment to justice." She paused, letting her words sink in. I felt Sophia's hand tighten around mine as the judge's gaze found me across the room. "Marcus recently secured a victory that will reshape criminal justice reform across this nation. A landmark case involving wrongfully convicted juveniles that took 3 years of pro bono work, countless sleepless nights, and a level of legal expertise that most attorneys can only dream of achieving." The silence was deafening. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward me, but this time the expressions weren't pitying or dismissive. They were confused, intrigued, and increasingly respectful. Tyler stood frozen at the podium, his face cycling through emotions, confusion, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. "I don't understand. What case? Marcus never mentioned—"
"Perhaps," Judge Hernandez interrupted smoothly, "that's because your brother is humble enough not to boast about changing lives and transforming the justice system. Perhaps he understands that true success isn't measured in billable hours or luxury cars, but in the impact we have on our communities and the lives we touch." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about this evening was about to change completely. Judge Hernandez stepped closer to the center of the room, her voice carrying with the authority of someone who had delivered countless verdicts. "The case I'm referring to is Rivera v. State of Arizona, a class-action lawsuit that Marcus spent 3 years building, representing 12 juveniles wrongfully convicted and sentenced as adults." My throat tightened. The Martinez case. She knew about the Martinez case. "These weren't just any defendants," the judge continued, her eyes finding mine across the room. "These were children, some as young as 14, who spent years in adult prisons for crimes they didn't commit. Victims of a system that failed them, abandoned by lawyers who saw them as lost causes." The room was silent except for the soft clink of champagne glasses being set down. I could see my parents leaning forward, their faces masks of confusion and growing comprehension. "Marcus Rivera didn't just win their freedom," Judge Hernandez announced, her voice rising with conviction. "His work uncovered systematic prosecutorial misconduct, leading to the largest civil rights settlement in Arizona's history. $47 million in damages, 12 lives restored, and legal precedent that will protect children across the nation." Gasps echoed around the room. I saw Helena's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Tyler gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "But here's what makes Marcus Rivera truly remarkable," the judge pressed on.
He turned down 3 separate offers from major law firms, offers worth millions in guaranteed income, to stay focused on this case. He worked pro bono for 3 years, living on ramen and determination, because he believed these children deserved justice. My mother's sob was audible across the room. My father sat motionless, his face pale with dawning realization. The legal community has been buzzing about this case for months, Judge Hernandez continued. Marcus Rivera's name is being mentioned for the American Bar Association's highest honor for civil rights advocacy. Law schools are already teaching his appellate brief as a masterclass in constitutional law. She turned to face Tyler directly. So, when you mock your brother's career, when you suggest he's wasted his potential, you're not just displaying ignorance. You're insulting one of the finest legal minds of his generation. At that moment, the reception hall doors opened, and a familiar figure stepped inside. David Martinez, dressed in a simple suit, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. Behind him walked 2 other young men I recognized, former clients, lives I'd helped rebuild. These gentlemen, Judge Hernandez announced, wanted to be here today to thank the man who gave them back their futures. David approached the microphone, his voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes on him. My name is David Martinez. 8 years ago, when I was 16, I was convicted of armed robbery. I spent nearly a decade in adult prison for a crime I didn't commit. Marcus Rivera didn't just prove my innocence, he gave me back my life. The transformation in the room was complete. Where moments before there had been polite condescension, now there was stunned respect. Where there had been dismissive laughter, now there was awed silence. I sat frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden recognition, the vindication I'd never dared to hope for. Sophia squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt, tears streaming down her face. Tyler gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright, faced with the undeniable truth that his failure of a brother had achieved something far greater than anything he had ever accomplished. The aftermath of Judge Hernandez's revelation sent shockwaves through the reception hall. Guests who had laughed at Tyler's mockery now approached me with expressions ranging from embarrassment to awe. The same people who had dismissed my career choices minutes earlier suddenly wanted to discuss civil rights law and criminal justice reform. Mr. Rivera, James Whitmore, appeared at my side, his earlier condescension replaced by genuine respect. I owe you an apology. I had no idea about your achievements. $47 million. That's extraordinary work. I nodded, still struggling to process the sudden shift. Across the room, I watched Tyler sink into his chair, his face pale and drawn. Helena sat beside him, her expression a mixture of shock and something that looked like disappointment in her new husband. My mother pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Mijo," she whispered, her voice breaking, "why didn't you tell us? All this time we thought—"
You thought I was a failure, I finished quietly. You made that clear every day. She flinched as if I'd struck her. My father appeared beside her, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Marcus, we didn't know. We just wanted— You wanted Tyler to succeed, I said. And you never once asked what I was doing with my life. You never once showed interest in my work. The hurt in their faces was almost unbearable, but I couldn't take back the truth. Years of dismissal and comparison had led to this moment. Sophia stood beside me, her presence grounding me as the chaos swirled around us. David Martinez approached, his eyes bright with gratitude. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying across the immediate area, "you saved my life. 8 years of my life stolen, and you gave them back. These people need to understand what kind of man you are." Helena rose from her chair and walked over, her designer gown rustling softly. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry. What Tyler said,
What we all assumed, it was wrong. I looked past her to where Tyler sat alone at the head table, staring at his hands. For the first time in our lives, he was the one overshadowed, the one diminished. But seeing him like that brought me no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for the distance between us. Judge Hernandez appeared at my elbow. "I hope you'll forgive my dramatic timing," she said with a slight smile, "but I couldn't let that performance go unchallenged. Your work deserves recognition, especially from your own family." The room buzzed with new conversations, but all I could think about was how it had taken a stranger to validate what my family had never seen. The vindication I'd dreamed of felt hollow now that it had finally arrived. As the crowd gradually dispersed into smaller conversations, I found myself standing with Sophia on the club's terrace, overlooking the golf course where the mountains stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. The noise from the reception felt distant, muffled by glass doors and the weight of everything that had just happened. "How are you feeling?" Sophia asked, her hand warm in mine. "Confused," I admitted. "I thought I wanted this, for them to finally see me. But now that it's happened, it feels empty?" I nodded. "It shouldn't have taken a federal judge to make my parents realize I had worth." Through the glass doors, I watched my mother approach hesitantly. Her earlier tears had been replaced by a determined expression I recognized from childhood, the look she wore when she was about to have a difficult conversation. "Marcus?" she called softly through the open door. "Can we talk?" Sophia squeezed my hand and stepped back. "I'll give you some space." My mother joined me on the terrace, her elegant dress incongruous with her vulnerable posture. "Mijo, I don't know where to begin," she said, her voice thick with regret. "Your father and I, we were so wrong, so blind." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why was it always Tyler? Why was everything I did never enough?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "Tyler was easy to understand," she said finally. "He was loud, successful in ways we recognized. You were always so quiet, so internal. We didn't know how to read you, how to celebrate achievements we couldn't see." "You never asked," I said. "In 3 years of working on the Martinez case, neither of you ever asked what I was working on." "You're right." The admission seemed to cost her something. "We assumed if it was important, you'd tell us. We didn't realize you'd stopped trying to share your life with us years ago." My father appeared in the doorway, his face aged by the evening's revelations. "Marcus," he said, his voice rough, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you 30 years of recognition I never gave." Inside, I could see Tyler sitting alone at the head table, Helena's chair empty beside him. She stood near the bar, deep in conversation with Judge Hernandez, her face animated in a way I hadn't seen all evening. "Where's Tyler?" I asked. "Struggling," my father said quietly. "This isn't easy for him either. He's realizing that everything he built his identity on, being the successful son, the family favorite, was based on tearing you down." As if summoned by our conversation, Tyler appeared on the terrace. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by something raw and uncertain. "Marcus," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I don't know how to fix this. What I said tonight, what I've been saying for years, was cruel, and it hurt. But Tyler, you're still my brother." "I don't deserve that," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I spent so long convincing myself that your choices were wrong, that my success somehow validated me. But listening to that judge, seeing what you actually accomplished, I realize I don't know you at all.
The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure how to cross. Helena approached from inside, her expression thoughtful. "I've been talking to Judge Hernandez about your work, about what it means to build something that matters versus building something that pays. I think Tyler and I have some things to figure out." The conversation was interrupted by David Martinez and the other former clients, approaching to say goodbye. Their gratitude was overwhelming, their words about second chances and restored futures carrying more weight than all the apologies combined. As they left, Judge Hernandez joined our small group. "Marcus," she said, "I hope you'll consider the opportunities coming your way. The Justice Department has taken notice of your work. There are positions opening that could use someone with your skills and integrity." Looking around at my family, flawed, finally honest, and maybe capable of healing, I realized this day had changed all of us in ways we were only beginning to understand. 3 hours later, as the wedding reception wound down and guests began to filter out into the Arizona night, I found myself in an unexpected place, surrounded by family members who were finally seeing me clearly. Tyler stood to address the remaining guests one final time. His earlier confidence had been replaced by something more genuine, more vulnerable. "I need to say something," he began, his voice carrying none of its usual performative charm. "Earlier tonight, I spoke about my brother in a way that was not only wrong, but cruel. Marcus Rivera is not the cautionary tale I made him out to be. He's the hero of this family, and I've been too blind and too selfish to see it." He turned to face me directly. "Marcus, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend however long it takes learning to be the brother you deserve." The remaining guests applauded softly, but the sound felt different now, respectful rather than performative. As Sophia and I prepared to leave, my parents approached for what felt like the 100th time that evening, but their words had evolved from shock and apology to something more substantive. "We want to know about your work," my mother said firmly. "Not just the big case, but everything. We want to understand the person you've become despite our failures, not because of our expectations." My father nodded, his calloused hands steady for the first time all evening. "We're proud of you, Marcus. Not proud like we're taking credit, but proud like we're honored to be your parents, even though we didn't earn it." Judge Hernandez appeared with her final offer of the evening. "Marcus, the position I mentioned, Special Advisor for Criminal Justice Reform in the Attorney General's office, the salary is substantial, but more importantly, the platform would let you affect change on a national level. Think about it." As Sophia and I walked to my apartment, I reflected on the surreal transformation of the day. This morning I had been the overlooked brother, the family disappointment who worked a dead-end job defending criminals. Tonight, I was being offered positions in the Justice Department and finally receiving the recognition I'd craved for so long. "How does it feel?" Sophia asked as we drove through the empty Phoenix streets. "Different than I expected," I admitted. "I thought vindication would feel like victory, but mostly it feels like relief, like I can finally stop carrying around the weight of their disapproval." "And your family?" I considered the question as we stopped at a red light. "They have a lot of work to do. We all do, but for the first time I think we might actually be willing to do it." Sophia smiled, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Your clients are lucky to have you, Marcus, and now maybe your family will be too."
The boy who had once hidden in his room with homemade inventions had grown into a man who changed lives and challenged systems. Tonight, for the first time, everyone else finally saw what Sophia and my clients had always known. That quiet determination and principled action could be more powerful than any amount of charm or wealth. Tyler's wedding had indeed been a celebration of success, just not the kind any of us had expected. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.